because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we discuss James Gandolfini and one of his final films, 2013's Enough Said.
So you're a masseuse?
I am. What is it that you do?
I'm a poet.
And I'm a dreamer.
No, really.
Oh, you're really a poet?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
This is Albert.
Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
You know, my friend Eva was just telling me that there is not one guy at this party that she's attracted
What?
to.
It's okay, there's no one here I'm attracted to either.
All right, great.
Some guy you met at the party wants your number.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, did I get the day wrong?
No, why?
Because you're wearing your pajamas?
It's Sunday, I like to be comfortable.
Oh, good.
This is my daughter.
Wow, she's stunning. Here's mine.
She's beautiful.
I don't know what my life is going to be like with this whole going away to college thing. I guess we should develop hobbies.
Actually, I weave.
Like baskets?
Yeah, I do it in the garage.
Really?
No.
Hi, Dad.
And we welcome to the show for the first time Jason Bailey. Jason is a film critic who's written for many outlets, including The Playlist, The New York Times, Vulture, Vice, Rolling Stone, and Slate. He's the co-host of the podcast Guide for the Film Fanatic, and he's the author of the new book, Gandolfini, Jim, Tony, and the Life of a Legend, available now. There it is.
I know. What a pro. He's holding it up for us.
There you go. That's a lovely picture, too. Well done with the choice of picture.
Beautiful cover.
Welcome to Cows in the Field, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's really a pleasure. I was thrilled to get the invite. I like the show very, very much.
That's so kind of you.
And I'm so pleased that, I don't know, that I gave you an excuse to finally see this film that you hadn't seen. Like, that makes me really happy.
So
Yeah.
we told Jason off mic that I had never seen it. You had never seen it either, right? It was the first time watch for both of us. And, and I think
I remember when it came out. I remember it was like, this is one of the last films he's in. Yes. And I remember it was like, people were like, oh, it's a romantic film featuring
it's an against type kind of thing. Yeah.
But I missed it. I don't know what I was up to in 2013, but I missed it.
Part of the reason I wanted to, in the context of James Gandolfini, do this film is this is one of the few leading man film performances that he did. And so, you know, he nonetheless had a fantastic career both in film, but then most famously on television, playing Tony Soprano. So tell us, Jason, a bit about why you find him a fascinating actor and one worthy of his own book.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I honestly just I just always liked him. Like, it's really that simple. But not because of The Sopranos. Like, I have found that sometimes as a critic, or even really just as like a film lover, sometimes you spot someone early and you sort of like put your gold star on them. Mm-hmm. And you start telling people like, this person is great, this person's going to be huge, whatever. You know, it's like you're collecting your rookie cards.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're wrong and they don't go much of anywhere. And sometimes you're right. But like, I was 17 when True Romance came out.
Okay, I was going to say it was True Romance, the movie.
It was the one for like, I mean, like 17-year-old at that time wanted to be a filmmaker, worked in a video store. Like, I was all in on Quentin Tarantino. Like, and that was sort of like, although he didn't direct it, that felt like the sophomore Tarantino movie because he wrote it and it came out after Reservoir Dogs. All of us in the video store were like nuts about Reservoir Dogs. So I was there like opening weekend, like, yes, True Romance. And like, look at all these incredible people in this cast. And then I came out of this movie with this incredible cast, not talking about any of them, but saying, who is that guy? Who is the guy in that scene? And from then on, I just always kind of had an eye on him. He would pop up, you know, never in leads, always nice, juicy supporting roles. Sometimes, you know, throughout, sometimes just a scene or two. You know, he's in Get Shorty, he's in Crimson Tide, he's in Civil Action. You know, he pops up and he's always so good. Sometimes the movie isn't good, but he's always great. And so then when The Sopranos happens, I'm very like, people are like excited about this gangster show. And I'm like, I'm excited about the James Gandolfini show. Like that was how I approached that show, because I was so proud that my rookie, had gone to the big show. And so and then from then on, after the show ends and during the show when he's doing more films, and I was incredibly impressed by his range, which I think is something that doesn't get talked about a lot and was really one of the purposes for me of writing the book, was just to reintroduce this idea that this was one note that he had. This was one role that he played memorably, but that character and that performance casts such a shadow over popular culture, period, but so much over his career that I feel like as we get further from his passing, that more and more just becomes all people think he was. And I wanted to find out what else was going on. I want to find out who else he was, what made him so good at that role, and investigate the ways in which he was categorically like opposite of that guy in every way, in how he, not just in the kind of person he was. Like, he wasn't obviously a ruthless killer mafioso, but I mean, he didn't carry himself like Tony Soprano. He didn't even talk like Tony Soprano. Like, that was a voice that he put on when he played mob guys. And when you hear him in his very rare interviews, he sounds like a Harvard professor. He has this like really clipped kind of nasal voice. He was so not Tony Soprano, but everyone just knows him as Tony Soprano. And so that, I think, was sort of the initial fascination. It's like, no, he was this whole other person. Who was that? And that becomes sort of the big question you got to answer.
So in the book, I don't want you to spoil the book, but for our readers who might be interested, I mean, give us like one thing that you discovered that you hadn't known about him that was surprising to you as you were doing research for the book.
The general thing that was just sort of overwhelming the more people I talked to, and I talked to 50 plus people, including like a whole mess of Sopranos cast and crew, but also, directors and co-stars of other films that he made. His personal generosity, his warmth, the extent to which he gave of his time, of his talent, often financially, just like everyone had a story about a time that Jim did something really wonderful for them.
I see. Oh.
And a lot of that just came down to the fact, and I really believe this, he was a working class guy. His parents were immigrants, basically. His mother was born here, but was raised in Sicily. His father was born in Italy and immigrated. They were working class people. They worked, like, his dad was a bricklayer, and then he was a janitor at a high school. His mom was the lunch lady at a girls' school. He did not come from tremendous wealth. And so I think he felt like, because he had lucked into this wealth, that he needed to share it with everyone, because it was just like some real great, there for the grace of God go I sort of stuff. So yeah, everyone had a story about a really wonderful thing that Jim did to them. Everyone said he knew everyone on the cast and crew, all up and down the call sheet by name. And in fact, Juliana Margulies told me that when she got The Good Wife, and that was the first time she was ever number one on the call sheet. This is, the big thing for actors, that she learned how to be number one on the call sheet from watching James Gandolfini when she was on The Sopranos, and from watching George Clooney when she was on ER. That like they taught her that, like, everyone on the cast and crew, them by name, you talk to everybody, you remember birthdays, like all of that stuff. She learned all of that from him. This was commonly, like, everyone had here's this wonderful thing that Jim did for me and didn't want me to talk about sort of stories.
Wow. That's so nice to hear. That's so nice. I mean, I do think there is something to the idea of, like, when you feel like you're there, not because you're entitled to be there, but that, you worked hard and you maybe there was a certain degree potentially of luck and all that too. And then you recognize the contingencies by which you came to your success in your career. It just makes you appreciate it more and thus like less of a dick to everyone else when you're and that makes so much sense. I mean, it's also so interesting. I was reading, snippets of the book here and there to prepare for this, and learning that he was like this high school thespian, but he played basketball too, because he was tall and lanky. That was his like initially. Yeah, it's so interesting just to think of. He must have been a really fun, just a super charismatic and fun guy to be around.
Yeah. His senior class voted him class flirt.
Class flirt.
But when you see, we got there are photos in the book from his yearbook. I interviewed his high school drama teacher, who was just a wonderful lady and so proud of him. And so, she sent me yearbooks and stuff like that. He was this like, when you look at the pictures of him, he was thin. He had sort of the feathered hair. He's very, sort of like John Travolta circa Saturday Night Fever sort of look about him, and went auditioned for his first play basically to meet girls. Like that was how it was pitched to him by like one of his friends. And then he walks in and auditions and just like knocks everybody out. He had this sort of incredible natural gift. He just is always believable, even, coming into that first audition.
But
I'm just thinking about like baby Jim Gandolfini going, "You want to kiss?"
Yeah. Well, yes. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting about just that first play that you write about, that he was so nervous. And he was so nervous and he couldn't get his lines right. And then similarly in Enough Said, how he had this moment, this very vulnerable moment with Nicole Holofcener, where he was nervous about the vulnerability that he was going to show as this character. And I think that's really, there he is. Yeah, Laura's got the picture. We could like insert some pictures.
We can put his little handsome face in there.
And because that's nothing. I mean, of course, Tony Soprano is a character. Of course, he's in therapy and all that. So he's dealing with anxiety. But so there are vulnerabilities, but that whole character is like putting up all these barriers and not revealing that vulnerability and that sort of eats away at him. And it's just cool to know that like this guy who must have been, he's an attractive guy, tall guy, charming, but had those insecurities. And I imagine they must have helped him become a better actor, as it helped fuel him at least.
Absolutely. He definitely drove him. He always wanted to do a good job, but that sense of insecurity about his gifts as an actor, like it never went away.
Yeah,
he was
crazy.
Always certain that he was screwing something up, that there was like, it became I talked to his managers and his agents who were all so informative on this sort of stuff. They said it became like a ritual that like 2 or 3 days before they were like starting production on whatever new movie he had booked, he would send an email to the director and just would say, are you sure about me for this? Like, did you think of, and then he would list like 4 other actors who he thought would be better for the role than he was. And they would all have to assure him, no, Jim, we like you. Yeah. We think you're best for this role. And, and once he sort of had that assurance, I guess that sort of, he felt like, well, I did my best to get out of it. And then he would go and be brilliant, I know.
And the amazing thing is his performances were all incredibly natural and naturalistic, and seemed like he just was embodying those characters. I mean, in particular, this performance in Enough Said, which I was blown away by.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's not. I mean, I watched or rewatched chronologically everything he did when I was sort of in the research phase of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I always do that. But like this, it was really important. And, and watched every episode of the show again and the movies that were interspersed with. I can say this confidently. I'm not hedging. He never put in a bad performance. And like, there are great actors who you cannot say that about. Like, I have seen bad Pacino performances. I have seen bad De Niro performances.
Yeah, like where they're phoning it in, where,
yes, exactly. Yeah. There is not a bad James Gandolfini performance that at least was captured on film and escaped into the world, But what's what's fascinating about this performance and why I was so happy that you guys wanted to talk about it is, you alluded to this, that it was a struggle for him to give the character and the performance the vulnerability that was required. That was tough for him. And a huge part of that, I believe, he didn't tell Nicole this, or if he did, she didn't tell me. But everyone who I talked to who knew him or worked with him to any extent, if the subject of this movie came up, they would immediately tell me, oh, that's Jim. Like, that is, if you want to know what it was like to spend time with him, that character is the closest anyone ever captured to James Gandolfini, the person. And I think giving that much of himself has such vulnerability. I mean, like, aside from any of the things that are happening emotionally in the narrative, which are extreme, like there's stuff this character goes through that I would not want to go through. But beyond any of that stuff, just the idea of, especially when you're an actor who has spent your entire career, as he had, creating distinct, unique, specific, not himself characters, putting on voices, changing his physical appearance. This was a method trained actor. Like, he knew, like, he worked in the, the Meisner method, so forth. To come to a point where you're being asked to strip all of those masks off and to just exist as the person you are basically on screen, that's terrifying for any actor, but especially for an actor like him who was so good at building and creating characters, who worked with externals the way that he did, who had to have costumes figured out, wigs figured out, facial hair, all of that, to have a director who just wanted him to be him. And I think it's telling that it took 30 years of acting to get to a point where he could do that he was still so scared of doing that. But then it's also really tragic because it's like he just had figured out how to unlock that.
Yeah.
When we lost him.
I know.
What
could have been. I know.
Like the performances that we lost when he passed will break your heart, but especially if you think of him in that context, like the very real possibility that he had sort of opened up a new door as an actor on his second to last film.
I know. And it really does feel that way. Watching the film, I mean, he's like magnetic in it. And just, I mean, and it is, one does think one cannot help. I mean, the film is dedicated to Jim. One cannot help, comes out posthumously. You just can't help but think, like, all of the what could have been's, like, that he had sort of overcome something, it seemed, with this one, and what was going to be next. Like, what could he have done? And also, like, I think, like, he could have very easily, like, after this, done a movie with a maybe slightly higher profile director and then been nominated for an Academy Award. I mean, it looks like that's the trajectory here.
He would have gotten into, like, the Alex Payne zone or something.
Or something like that. I don't know. And
no, those are all really plausible. And then the other thing to sort of bear in mind too, in terms of where he could have gone as an actor, and the timing of this just always kills me. This came out in 2013 in September. He died the previous summer. That spring, I want to say, maybe early summer, was when Netflix released House of Cards, first season of House of Cards. Mm-hmm. So this is like 2013 is the beginning of, like, the streaming explosion. And over the next few years, there are all of these new opportunities opening up in streaming, on streaming platforms, for series, for limited series, for all that sort of thing. And he had a development deal at HBO, like, in place when he passed. The notion of the kind of opportunities that might have been made available to them just through that medium, I think it's quite plausible that he could have done another role as iconic as Tony Soprano. like the opportunities were out there. You know, there were shows he was trying to get on the air. There were roles he might have been offered. We at risk of overstating the point, we lost him too soon. We really did.
It's true. It is true. But we were graced with Enough Said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2013 film by Nicole Holofcener, starring, and that's not something you can say very many times for films, as we mentioned, starring James Gandolfini and also Julie Louis-Dreyfus. So this movie, we watched it a few days ago, and then I was kind of rewatching parts of it and trying to think through the themes and the arcs of the characters. And I initially found it kind of vexing. And part of that is that I think I was thinking of it in sort of standard narrative arcs. And the film doesn't really, it sort of seems like it's following a standard narrative arc of like, oh, these two characters, it's a second chance story, you know, middle-aged rom-com. And all they have to do is overcome the things that are pulling them back, and then they'll like find love. Like that's what the story on the surface seems to be, but it doesn't go there. And I thought, initially I was vexed by that. I thought, maybe this is just like, you know, unsatisfying writing. But then, you know, Laura and I talked about it a bit, and I started to realize that, you know, I think the film, it's doing something, I think, a little bit more interesting than that. It's not following the standard rom-com script, at least middle-aged rom-com script. And there are these big moments, you know. So in the film, Julie Louis-Dreyfus meets, you know, she's a kind of like unlucky in love, divorcee. She meets Gandolfini, so her character's named Eva, his character's name's Albert, and you know, they kind of hit it off, and they start a relationship, and at the same time she's has a new client who turns out to be, she doesn't know this initially, his ex-wife, and who's dishing all this dirt on him. And when she finds out that Albert is her new client's ex-wife, she doesn't tell anyone, and she kind of continues to use Marianne, Catherine Keener's character, as a way of kind of getting dirt on Albert, and we could talk a bit about what exactly she's doing there, but she ends up ultimately deceiving him, not revealing this, and then this all culminates in, of course, the inevitable moment where she has to apologize and have that kind of seeking absolution. And it doesn't come in that moment. And in a way, it doesn't come in the film. It's unclear what happens in the end of the film when they're sort of months, maybe 3 months later at Thanksgiving, sitting on the porch. But what I think is so interesting is that in the narrative arc, then you might have thought that, well, it would show them having changed in a way that's relevant to them now getting together. But it doesn't. They're the same as they always were. That they're still enjoy each other's company, but they haven't really grown or changed as individuals. And anyway, I think that's actually really interesting. But I'm curious, like, does any of this resonate with you, Jason? And tell us, you know, a little bit about how you sort of see this film, both as like a Gandolfini vehicle, but then just also as like a, you know, a rom-com for us folks in our middle age.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, from the perspective just of his work, you're right in that it was a rare leading role. He had, you know, probably less than a half dozen film leading roles sort of during and after The Sopranos. Yeah. And they're all in really small, some of them kind of hard to see movies. But he's great in all of them. There's a really obscure thing that he did called Down the Shore with him and Famke Janssen that was directed by their mutual acting coach, Harold Guskin. It's kind of a Jersey past trauma drama, kind of a Mystic River sort of thing. It's so. He's great in it. There's a movie called Welcome to the Rileys with Kristen Stewart and him and Melissa Leo. It's okay. He's really great in it. You know, this is sort of the refrain. He's the lead in John Turturro's Romance and Cigarettes, which is a fascinating movie that doesn't completely work, but when it does, it like absolutely sings. It's a musical. It's sort of like a Pennies from Heaven sort of like people bursting into songs, but like singing along with old records. And it's in a very like working class milieu, and it's a lot of fun. So you get to see him sing. He sings and dances, and has a very pleasing baritone. It's worth seeing just to see that. But you know, he didn't get hung up on doing a lot of leads even after The Sopranos. And in one of the rare interviews in that period, he said, look, I was the lead for, 10 years. I don't need that anymore.
Fair.
He really did sort of, in many ways, go back to being the actor he had been before the show and doing, sort of gunslinger, come in, kill it in a supporting role. Just this time now he was able to do it in much higher profile movies. So he's doing that in things like Zero Dark 30 and Killing Them Softly and In the Loop, which is, he's so funny in the Loop if you get a chance to see that. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit. But he had not been offered a leading man romantic comedy ever before this, he said. And the quote that I loved that he gave about it, this was, he gave this quote when he was in production on it, when he was promoting something else. He said, I don't get called for that kind of thing, the parts where you get to kiss the girl. It's kind of like a buffalo kissing a rabbit when I'm kissing Julia, but it was nice that they gave the buffalo a chance. And I really like that quote. But I think he is so sweet and so charismatic and so charming and just likable. And he has this kind of warm but shy quality that, from what I understand, was very much a piece of who he was. And he has that, especially with her early on. And what I love so much about their chemistry is that you know that she's a little hesitant. And from a purely aesthetic standpoint, in terms of conventional attractiveness, and I want to really hit that conventional hard, because I know quite a lot of women who find James Gandolfini quite attractive, but from a standpoint of the sort of conventional, handsome leading man, she's out of his league just when you look at them next to each other. And so what I think is so wonderful about her performance is that you see her falling for him. That, the way she smiles with him and the way she laughs with him and the way that their rapport is happening in something almost like semi-real time in those first date scenes. Like, I feel like that was so important that you see that you see her fall in love with him and understand why she does and believe it, and so that they're so relaxed together, and Holofcener just kind of lets them vibe off of each other. And so you do end up pulling for them in that really essential way that you have to in a romantic comedy.
That's right. You have to, yeah.
Or none of it works. The whole thing falls apart. And so I think it's wonderful that happens, and that then you do feel a weird sense of betrayal almost on his behalf when she's holding this secret, poking around, starting to use things against him. He's so sympathetic in all of those scenes because we know something that he doesn't. Like, that's just, classic sort of methodology for making a character sympathetic. But then in terms of the arc that you're talking about, what I really thought was interesting, and I'm hard pressed to think of another film it's certainly another romantic comedy that did this, was the big sort of scene where you're expecting them to kiss and make up. The scene in his kitchen. When she comes to the house and she's just putting it all out there and she's giving him all of her apologies and trying to explain it and so forth. And he doesn't accept it. And when he opens himself up like that, and he is so vulnerable in that scene, and he is so honest and understandable about why it felt like such a betrayal.
And it didn't get poisoned, Albert. I still really wanted us to keep seeing each other.
I wouldn't know how,
I'm so sorry.
I know this sounds corny, but you broke my heart. And I'm too old for that shit. And the worst part of it is that you made me look like an idiot in front of my daughter.
I'm the idiot. I'm the idiot.
It almost feels like it's a moment of like protagonist transference. I don't know if that's like a thing or if I'm using the right terminology to describe it, but really and truly, the film is from her perspective. You know, there are, I don't think any scenes that he is in that she is not, but she is in every scene. So it's told through her eyes. But yet in that moment, Holofcener and Dreyfuss allow her to be the villain a little bit. Like they let her become the antagonist and let him sort of become the he is the sympathetic figure in that scene. He's the person that we hope for, or that we hurt for. And it would have been so easy for her to write in some equivalent mistake for him. Some sort of leveling thing that like he could have done to have made it, put them on equal. You know, I can't think off the top of my head what that would be. I'm not a screenwriter, but it would have been very easy to lessen her betrayal by giving him some commensurate flaw. And they don't do that. They are willing to let her screw up and not get away with it. Not get away clean. And I think I just think that's really interesting. And Holofcener throughout her filmography is not afraid of that, taking those kinds of risks in terms of empathy and sympathy and, you know, the sort of tired notions of like, are we rooting for these characters? You know, are they, you know, or is it a protagonist that is perfect in a lot of ways that sometimes women filmmakers feel like they have to be with their women characters, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, I think she, so just to speak briefly on the role of Eva and Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character, I think that my sense is that Holofcener and the film think of like have empathy towards her, even if she isn't fully portrayed sympathetically because they allow her to be the villain. I completely agree with that. But so here's what I mean by that. So I think they help us understand why she's doing what she's doing, which is helping us get the empathy for her, even while we see that what she's doing, and this happens in multiple parts of the film, are actually harming, preventing her from realizing the thing that she wants. So there are at least two things of this. One is her relationship with Albert, and the other is her relationship with her daughter. Both of which are, she's doing things to protect herself in these relationships that end up driving these people who she loves away from her. And with her daughter, it's her kind of cozying up to her daughter's friend who happens to be around more than her daughter, which alienates her daughter, understandably. And with Albert, I think it's more complicated because I'd be curious actually what all of you guys think, but I kind of read her motivations for maintaining her relationship with Marianne and continuing to, to get that information from Marianne as not a matter of genuinely getting information, because I think that everything she learns from Marianne, Albert has already told her. So
he told her the guacamole thing on the first.
He told her the guacamole. They're very candid with each other.
They had a conversation like, "What did your hacks hate about you?
Yeah.
What did your hacks hate about you?" Yeah. And he gave her all the info.
He gave her the info, and he's like, "I'm a slob. I do the guacamole thing." obviously
I don't stick to diets.
Yeah,
and what does she say? He's a slob. He doesn't stick to diets. He does the guacamole
Exactly.
thing. That's it.
But so that's why I think what she's getting from Marianne isn't information, even though it might seem like that on the surface. But she has this kind of competitive, and maybe Laura, you can speak to this, but competitive female relationship with Marianne. She's intimidated by Marianne. Marianne is friends with Joni Mitchell, and and it has lives this life, this glamorous life. She's a poet that Julia Louis-Dreyfus is intimidated by, and I think she, as a result, like there's this cool girl who's rejected the man you are in love with. What does that say about you? That you kind of suck, and that like there's something wrong with you because you want to be more like Marianne. So I think what she's trying to do in this is she's trying to see if her love, and I think this has got something to do with her generally with her character, but she doesn't in a way trust her own judgment of Albert as a good person, as a lovable person.
Oh, wow.
And so she's kind of going through this motion of like testing herself, like, can I deal with the things Marianne didn't like about him, in ways that are often unfair to him, like being a dick to him at various points.
Well, maybe if he had a girlfriend or something, so it would balance it out, but I don't see that happening. No.
Oh, really? Why not?
Because he's a loser.
Oh.
Such a mean word, but it fits.
How does it fit?
For instance, and this is typically Albert, when we were first going out, he had nothing next to his bed, no table, nothing. And at first I thought, that's cute, it's kind of bohemian and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So then we got married, and I went out and I bought these really lovely bedside tables. And then last year, I saw all of his stuff was on the side of his bed again. I mean, I took the tables, granted, but he never went out and replaced them. He's just content to just put his shit on the floor again. Metaphorically speaking, he's not building a life for himself. I mean, who would date a person like that? Right?
And while that is messed up, one can understand that it's not like an insane thing to do. Like, of course, we are always, I mean, it's a sad and weird thing, but we are always evaluating our own relationships through the lenses of other people.
Sure.
And how, and like
that moment that you introduce your significant other to your friend group, like partially it's like, will this person be able to like get along in my life and these friends that I already have? But it's also like, are they gonna, if they don't like him, is it because my perspective is warped? Yeah, like,
right.
Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, I value their perspective because And I think even Sarah, her friend, Toni Collette, like at one point she's like, can we get dinner with him? And Tony's like, yeah, we can get dinner with him, but like not if you want to know if you like him or not. Like, I'm not going to be that person to tell him. That.
She says that. She's like, not to tell whether or not you should like him. Something like that.
Because she's a shrink. She sees right through that.
She's a shrink, although she might want to like look at her own marriage or something. But, I mean, they sort of do. They talk about it to everybody else but each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's why I think it's empathetic.
Right. And that tension that is real and is part of why the character works. I didn't mean to sort of super simplify it as being this all sort of outright dark betrayal thing.
No.
It's but that tension between what she's doing, what she's keeping, and what she really wants and what she's trying to get out of it, I think is really fertile and is a huge part of why the movie works as well as it does. I have to say, I think a huge part of that of threading that needle and having the character do the things she does while maintaining, for the most part, likability, is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Like,
oh yeah, that's totally.
she brings such, just like, decades of our goodwill into this character, and which I think is key because just going off the page just a touch, I always found it interesting. Every previous Nicole Holofcener film, Catherine Keener played the lead. She plays what appears in most of them to be roughly approximate to like the Nicole Holofcener, stand-in, basically. This was I believe, the last time her and Nicole Holofcener worked together. And I've always wondered if that was because she did not cast her in the lead. If there was weird, like, bad blood between, this is pure conjecture on my part. But if, the fact that she had given what was traditionally, her role, the leading role, to this other actor and had her play the secondary role. I wonder about that. But I have to say, as much as I love Catherine Keener, and I know that she's capable of a lot of different types of roles, I'm not trying to, to typecast her. I don't know if she could have played this role. I think we the same way that we have all of this sort of positive association to Elaine primarily, that we bring to when we watch Julia's performance in here. Catherine Keener just plays mean people so well, so memorably. So
there's
even though
elegance to her too, and you can't quite see her like pulling her bed up the stairs and kind of like lusting after a poet's life, because she's just the way she holds herself and her voice, like you're like, that's the poet. She's got to be the poet in this.
Yeah. So I don't know. I find that sort of fascinating. But yeah, that casting is really key to that character working the way that it does.
Yeah. I mean, the other aspect of the film, and I think this is in both Eva and Albert's character, that resonated with me is the difficulties of, you've been spurned, you've been in a relationship, you've been through a lot of shit. So you're in the midlife, you're firmly in the midlife. We're entering the midlife, but they're firmly in the midlife. And you've effectively lived in what would have been in any other era of human civilization an entire lifetime. And now you are sort of facing the prospect of another lifetime, the midlife. But you've already been through everything. You've fallen in love, you've been divorced, you're jaded, you're cynical, but you also have kids. And both characters are deeply rooted in that past, in their past parts of their lives. So, Eva in her attachment to her daughter, and in her sort of, when we meet her, she's like, I don't find anyone at this party attractive. Like, she's written off love. She's just like, I don't need this. I don't need a guy in my life. And with Albert, I mean, his job is watching and cataloging old TV shows. Like, that's his job. Like, it's just like so much on the surface of his character that this is a guy who's in a way stuck in the past. And both of them are, they both love their daughters sort of and have invested everything into their daughters, to the point where they're worried, like, well, what's going to happen when our daughters go away to college? Like, there's like, is there anything left to do? I guess we get a hobby. What am I supposed to do?
Oh, man. I started sobbing at that scene where they said goodbye
Laura,
at the airport.
Yeah, well, yes.
I'm going to be a mess in 13 years.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So, but I love, it really did resonate with me, though, as this, as I think this is a universal thing, even if we're not all divorced or whatever, but like, that when you get to the midlife, it's like, okay, what next? And how do you move beyond because you have to, we're always moving forward as human beings, developing and changing. But how do you do that in a way while also preserving the continuity with your past life and the things that mattered to you, then, but of course you're changing and you need to move beyond those things in certain ways. And both of these characters are struggling with that. And that's what's in a way preventing them from getting together. With Eva, in the case of her inability to sort of trust herself because she's already been spurned in a relationship, and even maybe trust another person. And then with Albert, it's a little bit less clear with Albert, but I think it is to a certain degree of like, the bedside tables. It's a metaphor. What's it a metaphor for? I'm not totally sure, but it does seem like a kind of, you don't buy furniture if you're not expecting to be there for very long. So maybe there's some sense of like, he's not rooted. He doesn't have anything, to sort of stay in LA for, except for his daughter, I guess. And so both of them trying to like find something and, but being kind of in a way unable or unwilling to take that leap. And that to me feels very tragic. And the movie does it, despite having a relatively upbeat ending in terms of the music, it feels very tragic to me. Like and that's why I felt so conflicted about it. I felt like I initially read that as like the movie's confused about what it wants to do. But on reflection, I think it's really that the movie is celebrating the messiness of life, and that we're all in this situation. There's sweet and sour, and it's just complicated, and there really is no sort of saccharine resolution where they kiss at the end of the movie.
The title, It's Complicated, was already taken.
I know, it's complicated.
They had to go. And,
You Hurt My Feelings was coming up. So.
She was holding on to that one for later.
Yeah.
I love the like getting to know you honeymoon romance scenes that they have.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what did we do in our 20s, Justin? Compare me, like
it's so different.
Make each other CDs.
It's
talk
so different
about the handful of relationships we'd had before, like at I guess like first sexual encounters or something. But they're like, how is your body decaying?
I know.
Yes.
They're like, what's inside your mouth? What's going on in there?
Yeah.
You missing teeth? How many fillings you got? Like what?
Yeah.
You should
what's
get that
your
fixed.
state of decay. I love that. I love that. Like that's like what I mean. Yeah, maybe that's what you do when you're closer to that age, and like you're getting intimate with a person, and you're just like, let's ride this out together.
And the sex is awkward, and there's not, and it's in a way not conventionally sexy, like,
right.
And I love that the movie is willing to just sit in that space and not, I don't know, it doesn't need to sugarcoat it, but at the same time, it doesn't gloss over it either.
Come on.
No.
Open your mouth.
No.
Open your mouth.
Make me.
Huh?
Make me.
Open your mouth.
Okay.
Oh my God, you're missing a tooth? You are.
Yes, I am.
Let me see. Oh, well, you can't tell. It's way back there. Doesn't matter.
I have to get some kind of hideous bone graft, and it costs a lot of money, and I'm putting it off.
Oh, yeah. My grandma Dee Dee had that.
Hey, Grandma Dee Dee. Thank you for that. Thanks.
Yeah. And that, and one of the things that I think is so fabulous about this movie, again, that I don't know that I've ever seen in another romantic comedy, is that the first kiss doesn't land.
Yeah.
That incredible moment, which works
a rough moment.
Works on like 4 different levels. He leans in for the kiss and she says, "I'm not sure," which is such a brilliant line. In a way, it's almost more heartbreaking than a straight up no. You know what I mean? She's like, I'm not sure. And he takes the hit and he moves away, and he's like as good natured about it as he can be. But like, yeah, that is like, this isn't on video. Laura's like clutching her heart. And I agree. I agree 100%. No, that is like, because, and you feel so much sympathy for him in that moment, but also for her. Like, we've all been in that situation where it's the end of the date and we're not sure. Sometimes you're just not sure. But the fact that like they're willing, that Hall of Center is willing to put in those little speed bumps along the way, which I think are woefully underrepresented in romantic comedy in general. It's not that there are not things standing in the way of the couple getting together, but there are always these like huge, contrived, stupid
externalities,
bullshit
kind
things.
Of, yeah.
Yes.
And not
the
like
fact,
not being sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's this mythos, or there's the ideology that's perpetuated in romantic comedies typically, which is that there are 2 people who are effectively fated to be together. And if it weren't only for these external factors that need to be overcome. And very often in real life, it's much messier than that. And our feelings are mixed and complex. And that's hard, one, to portray in a film because you only have so much space, and 2, it's less satisfying to an audience that goes into a rom-com with certain expectations. They want certain things. They want to have certain expectations gratified, and they want, you want to feel good about. You want to feel the secondhand smoke of love. You want to be in the space of these people are so in love, and that like makes me sort of enamored with them and their love. And this film is like, no, these 2 people are falling in love, but it's a messy and complicated affair. And it's going to be awkward at times.
And they're getting in their own way and
But that
tripping
doesn't
on their own
mean
feet.
they shouldn't be together. It also doesn't mean, whether they are together. I think what's interesting is that the question of whether they're going to be together at the end of the film left open. It seems to me like it's a question that's just up to them. It's not like they have to be together. This is what the gods have intended. Or they shouldn't be together because they're completely opposite, like how it's often the case in, other rom-coms where it's like, oh no, these people can't be together. They're so incompatible. In this one, it feels like it could go either way, and it's just kind of their choice. And
it is.
And I think that is true to life. I mean, that is
This is
that
also
is
just
reality.
like some grown-up stuff.
That's grown-up shit, right?
That's grown-up shit. And in a real way, I feel like it's also like nothing. The construction of this thing and all of the external things that are happening, which we've discussed, are not accidental, are not random. This is not a mistake that they're both experiencing empty nest syndrome simultaneously. And I think oftentimes in movies and in real life, it would be so easy for them to veer immediately from losing their daughters into like living together. You know what I mean? That would be such an easy solution. And I think they're both aware of that early on. And I think that might be what I like so much about the ending, which is that I think, God, it's the oldest cliche, but the line about how you have to, you can't really love someone else until you love yourself. I feel like this is sort of a real world application of that they need that time alone, really alone, empty in the in the empty nest, before to sort of figure out who they are and what they're going to be, like you were talking about, in this sort of midpoint in their life when they're starting a new life, a new act.
Yeah. I like that point a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that I feel like if they are sort of starting anew in that last scene, it feels like they're more emotionally, psychologically equipped for that than they would have been if they would have just like moved in together as soon as they sent the girls off to college or whatever. I don't know.
I think that's exactly right. There's this ellipsis that happens, and we know 3 months have passed, and we also know that they've been kind of eyeing each other from afar, but they haven't ever spoken in those 3 months. And so they've really spent time apart. Ideally, they've been growing as individuals separately, and now perhaps they're able to. But that's the only sense we get that they've had any change. Otherwise, Albert makes a joke about getting bedside tables, and their banter is basically the same as it is when they first met each other. So it's almost like it's like a first date, second chance at the first date, or something like that. Like, we got our shit, we started to arrange our shit, and now we're gonna have a first date again and kind of give it a try again. And that's really nice. I kind of like that. I mean, the other thing about it is, if you think of like, when you were thinking, when you were saying the thing about they're empty nesters, but like they could just get together. And I was thinking, yeah, a worse movie than this would be one where they meet each other and they're constantly like bickering and they hate each other. And then at the end they realize, oh, we love each other and our daughters went off to college and we can now be together. And you're like, that would have been the worst movie. And this is definitely like, it has like the seeds of that, in that it has, if you're like a connoisseur of rom-coms, you could see those tropes circling this, but it just doesn't engage with it. It doesn't, it's not going in that direction. And that does make it, I mean, yeah, that does make it a more mature film.
I think there are a lot of versions of this that you can imagine that would be considerably worse. I mean, even the central conceit played broadly could suck, like this idea of the ex-wife who was like, first of all, it feels like such an insane coincidence. And and even when I heard the premise, I was like, that's an insane coincidence. I think it's set up well. I think it's credible that they would both be at that party where she happened to meet them both, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, like, there are all sorts of sort of trite, hackneyed rom-com, sitcom ways in which that conflict could manifest itself, could reveal itself, could, you could go into full-on bedroom farce on this premise if you wanted to.
Yep, absolutely.
And the fact that she chooses to play it down the middle, to play it realistically, to play it as if it were a real thing that could feasibly happen, is probably, I'm sure was second nature for her. She's a filmmaker who works always in a very naturalistic, sort of keenly observed style, but it's very easy to imagine it going another direction.
Totally. I want to ask you guys about 3 things about the film that I was a little bit confused by. So the first thing is what we should think about how the subplot involving Sarah, that's Toni Collette's character, and her kind of, love-hate relationship with her housekeeper. Like how we should think of that as fitting into this. Now, one answer is just, it doesn't, it's just funny. But I wonder if there's a way in which it does fit thematically with some of the things we've been talking about. That is also with Albert and Eva's relationship. Anyway, do you have thoughts on this? I did find it quite funny, but I also was like, it did sort of vex me a little bit.
I mean, that is very much sort of part and parcel of the Hall of Center. So those are sort of ongoing thematic preoccupations for her.
Okay.
There are other films that deal sort of more explicitly with being upper class and not being comfortable about it.
Got it.
Friends with Money is explicitly about that. And Please Give, it's quite strong throughout that one as well. So I sort of saw that as an extension of those themes. It hadn't occurred to me to sort of put it into the context that you're putting it into, though, which I think I think makes sense. It certainly didn't strike me as some random thing, but certainly strikes me as something that Nicole Holofcener is very aware of.
It's a preoccupation of hers.
Very much. That she's like a New York liberal who has had some financial
she might have a housekeeper.
success.
Yeah.
Yes. And feels a little weird about some of this stuff. And I find that sort of interesting and refreshing.
It's funny. I mean, it's totally funny. Do you have thoughts on that, Laura? I don't know if you.
No, I mean, I think so. Like I said, so the only other Hall of Center movie I had seen before this was You Hurt My Feelings, which I loved. But that movie is like the kernel of that movie is just like is a miscommunication, or not even just like the husband tells a friend something that was not the same thing as he told the wife, and from there it just sort of opens up all the ways in which we find it difficult to communicate with the people that we love the most, how intimacy can kind of get in the way of that, whether or not omission and white lies and are truly like betrayals, or like how do you be supportive of a person and be completely honest? Can you be completely honest with somebody you love and want to support? And all the ways to that communication gets refracted. So I just saw this again as like an extension. I was like, this clearly communication, miscommunication, and confusion are something that like keep her up at night and she thinks about all the time. And when there's class in the way as well, I mean, then I think that is having an honest conversation with a domestic worker in your home, like you're not doing the service that I want, is a really uncomfortable one. Letting somebody go is a really uncomfortable thing to do. Providing that kind of negative feedback, I think, is hard, regardless of how you feel about the person generally. It's hard when it's your loved one. It's hard when it's like a subordinate or somebody who like you are in the position of power too. So I think she's just like wants to like play in that space. Also, I wonder if it's in the script that when Julia Louis-Dreyfus jumps back out, she's like, this is awkward, but I think I put the ball in the drawer.
That was a really funny line.
I was like, did she?
That's great.
I was like, did
great
she
moment.
improv that?
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's
and
really
it's like
good.
such a little like good tag
really
at the
good.
end.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you mentioned You Hurt My Feelings, because it is a sort of a fascinating, that's also Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and they've done these two films together. And they did that one 10 years exactly after this one. And it's always struck me as sort of like, it feels, obviously it's a different character. It's set in New York, but it feels very much like the spiritual sequel to this one.
Yes, and they have a grown son too, who's like sort of out of the nest, but sort of in the nest. And yes, it does feel like a companion piece.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that, again, that it's about knowing something about your partner that they don't know you know.
Yes.
And the complexities of that sort of just hovering over all of your interactions, which is relatable and tricky and terrific. Yeah. I like putting those movies in conversation with each other. So I'm glad you brought that one up.
The other question, okay, so I have two other questions. Maybe in some ways you may have touched on how you might answer the second question, but okay, so there's this recurring thing in this film, which is when Eva, Julia's character, is going up to one of her clients. She's a massage therapist, and she's lugging this heavy massage table up the stairs. And she sort of like looks at this guy like the first time, like, come on, man, you're not helping me. You're not even going to offer to help. And then she calls this out, and then she does it again. And then in the final time we see her do it, she just asks him for help, and he's like, oh my God, yeah, totally. So I wanted to know what you guys thought of this, because it's in a way, I mean, it's a throwaway part of the film in that it's not centered at all, but it is a moment she comes back to again and again. It's a recurring action of the characters. So I was just curious what you guys thought of this, and whether, here's one to make it even more specific, whether we should think of her finally asking for help as a representation of growth in her character, or how should we think of that change?
That's what I was about to say before you said that. Going back to the point you made earlier about how they don't necessarily change in the ellipsis in that little 3-month stretch, I'm not sure that that's 100% right, because like that moment, I think, represents a key small shift, but a representative one, potentially. The idea of asking for help, of saying out loud what you need from someone else, is a really key component to like having a successful relationship as an adult.
Yeah.
Whereas so much of the sort of bullshit of relationships when you're like in your 20s is this expectation of sort of mind reading, and like, you know, she's in trouble because, well, she should know why I'm mad at her, you know, like all of that sort of bullshit that we all traffic in. And I think there's a lot of that of their relationship is in sort of learning to say the things out loud that maybe we previously wouldn't be comfortable saying. And I think that comes to serve as sort of a metaphor for that. The idea that this is something that drives her fucking crazy, and she just stews on it and stews on it and complains about it, and then finally says something, and he didn't even realize he was fucking up. And he immediately helps her. Well, maybe there are things about this relationship that function in the same way. And like all of the things that, I'm sorry, Catherine Keener's character is
Marianne.
All of the things that Marianne is saying made her crazy about Albert are things she just stewed on and boiled on in a very similar way, as opposed to just like having an open and honest interaction with someone you care about and saying, how can I help you diet? How can I get you to not do the thing with the guacamole? How can, you know, like maybe in some way we can read that as her no longer doing the kind of thing that shipwrecks a marriage the way that it did with Marianne and Albert.
Sorry, I'm just laughing to myself because I'm like, oh yeah, and Marianne's like a poet, which means like she's always talking obliquely.
Yeah,
she's like,
100%.
Nobody can understand what she's saying.
Yeah.
That was my thinking too. It's just that like just especially because she sort of bounces that off of her married coupled friends, And they have maybe sort of like a gendered response where the guy's like, did you ask him to help? And she's like, I shouldn't have to. And Sarah's like, yeah, he shouldn't have. No, he should just know, because men know that they should lift things or something, which is, I think the therapist should know better than that. But like,
right.
that not everybody's a mind reader. But yeah, I had just seen it as like, not that she's like needs to ask for help, but just that like, if something if something's niggling at you, if it's keeping you up at night, it's probably not even on the other person's mind. You just need to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it can be hard.
It is interesting, though, because what imperils her relationship is, of course, her withholding of information. But it's not, what really is imperiling their relationship is not her being unwilling to tell him about stuff she doesn't like about him. Because she, in a way, does say these things. It comes out in a really mean way oftentimes, because it comes out in inappropriate at the dinner, in front of other people in ways that where he's not able to sort of, he loses face and stuff. But, and so that's what kind of confused me, is that like, what is imperiling their relationship is, I think, an inward thing with her and her inability or unwillingness to trust her own judgment about him. And she has to kind of come to terms with that. And as a result of that, she's ends up deceiving him. So but I think so that's why it didn't quite connect to me, and in the way that the thing with her daughter did, where it felt like, okay, at least with the case with the daughter, I can sort of see she does this preemptive action of self-preservation in a way, and attempting to try to find in the case of the daughter, find a replacement for the daughter effectively. And that ends up like kind of hurting her own interests in the long run. But, another answer, and I put this to you, Laura, before, you kind of gave the answer you gave to the previous question, which is like, maybe this is just a Holliff Center, like the sort of thing you said, Jason, like it's kind of like the thing she is interested in, like these kind of characters that are not talking to one another, and if they just were to kind of be open and honest with one another,
right? Or they're talking to the wrong people. They're talking about it, but they're not talking to the correct people. They're not talking to one another, or they're like sharing too much with the wrong kind of like conversation partner and too little with the person that needs to hear it. I think there's a lot of that too, because you pointed out like Eva's character is often sort of sharing too much or in an inappropriate amount with different
people. It's in the wrong context.
In the wrong context. And like figuring out like how much intimacy and transparency to have with the right person at the right time is
that's the challenge.
And like a challenge we all work on every single day. It's like, and like when we don't get it right, the ways in which those misunderstandings or hurt become refracted and grow and like become something else is something I think it seems to be fascinating to her.
The last question I have for you guys is about the title. So it's I was thinking that the more natural title for this film is "You Hurt My Feelings," because I mean, effectively, James Gandolfini says that to her. He says, "You broke my heart."
Yeah.
But the actual title is "Enough Said." And I don't think that phrase is ever uttered in the film. Sometimes that happens. You get the title from some phrase a character says. So what do you guys think about the title? Like, why Enough Said?
I don't love the title. It feels to me just like it feels like much more of a standard issue rom-com title than the movie is a standard issue rom-com.
Yeah.
It's memorable.
Maybe it was a studio note.
It may have been. It's memorable. I remember that title, but it I don't know. It doesn't, unless you want to get like sort of painfully literal about it. And like at some point she should have said that's enough to, Marianne or whatever. I don't know. That's kind of the best I got on it.
I know. I don't think it's one of the weaker parts.
I did think though that there are these two ways of thinking about "enough said," that phrase. So the way you put it, which is like, I've said enough, like, or you've said enough said, stop talking, right? Just stop. But then there's another way of thinking about it, which is you've reached a point of saying enough, or when have you reached a point of saying enough that you have formed a genuine, whatever, for the purposes of speaking, in this case, forming a genuine relationship with someone. And, has there been enough said? And one might wonder whether one could think that what's gone on, the problem at the center of their relationship is that not enough was said between them, in that, like, there wasn't this kind of, open disclosure of these issues that Eva was having with Albert, and that they needed to she needed to sort of have that conversation with him. So not enough was said. And
I mean, I would not have, like, enough said sounds like it could be a Katherine Heigl movie from like 2009.
Yeah.
It just, it kind of has that quality.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, thank you so much for being here. And so the book is, let me redo the title again. Oh, here it comes. Book is Gandolfini, Jim, Tony, and the Life of a Legend. And it's available now in bookstores everywhere. So people should go and check it out.
We didn't mention our fun fact.
Oh yes. So, do you want to drop the fun fact?
As they're comparing their decaying bodies, toesies and feet come up, right? And like, because he's talking about how his mom had like weird feet. He doesn't like feet, or he doesn't like some kinds of feet.
Mm-hmm.
And we get some very lovely shot of Albert wearing his Birkenstocks. Is that right? What you have a fun fact from your research, sir?
The fun fact is that I was told by his agent, or I'm sorry, one of his managers, Nancy Sanders, told me, yeah, he was as vulnerable and real and James Gandolfini as he was ever going to be. Those were his Birkenstocks. That's who he was. If anyone wants to know who Jim Gandolfini was, he was the closest to that character. So yeah, like this was, the Birkenstocks were mentioned to me by other people as well as being just like a facet of him that you would not guess from Tony Soprano.
Tony Soprano wore Birkenstocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Steve Sharippa told me, he said he was not Tony Soprano. He was this bearded, music-loving, Birkenstock-wearing hippie kind of dude. And that phrase and the way he said it is always stuck in my head. So yeah, that's basically Jim's everyday attire. The sort of sweatpants and t-shirts and that sort of everyday wear.
He likes to be cozy for a brunch, and I like it.
He likes to be cozy at brunch.
Yes.
In his breakfast nook, his bagels and breakfast nook.
He did.
He did. Like, what a wonderful life. I'm like,
yep.
I'm ready to date Albert. I mean, now this is
wait a second.
This is
now
weird.
hold on. You're married.
I just pulled a Sarah, and I'm like, in my second marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
On that lovely note, Jason, thank you for being here. And so also tell us about the podcast that you are a co-host of.
Yes. So we co-host a show called Guide for the Film Fanatic. We did 100 episodes of a show before this. My co-host, Mike Hull, who I've been friends with since I was 16. We did a show called A Very Good Year that we did 2 seasons of like 50 some episodes each, where a guest came on and picked their favorite year of movies, and we talked about all the movies of that year. And then, we did 100 episodes, so we like ran out of good years. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to re-gauge. So what we did now is it's called Guide for the Film Fanatic. It's based on Danny Perry's book, which is a book that I found that film lovers either swear by or have never heard of. There's no like middle ground. There's no agnostics on Guide for the Film Fanatic, but it's a compendium of 1,600 great, classics, cult movies, weird stuff, mainstream stuff, hits, obscurities, etc. It's just all the movies that you should see if you love movies. And so each episode we invite a guest to come on to pick one of those movies from that book, and we spend an hour talking about that movie and sort of when it came out and what it did when it came out, read some reviews, break it down really granular, much as you guys do. And yeah, we're midway through our first season and we're really enjoying it. So you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And also we have become simultaneously recording it on video, putting it up on YouTube, people. So if you like to watch your podcast on YouTube, I don't get it. I cannot imagine watching a podcast on YouTube. No disrespect to anyone who does, but we do that now. So that's
anybody watching this right now.
Guide for the Film Fanatic on YouTube as well. So
Guide for the Film Fanatic. And Jason, again, thank you for being here. Everyone should check out the book Gandolfini. It's really a lovely book, and it's just like written in a just a lovely, buoyant way with many, many little stories and anecdotes about Mr. Gandolfini. Feeney, as I learned he was called in high school. That is just that's a very cute nickname. Thank you so much, Jason. And as for us, in 2 weeks, join us back here to discuss Heat with Zed Adams, professor of philosophy at the New School. So come out and check that out. We are at Cowspod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.com. And please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts so people can find us. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.